everyone, my name is Bianca Gross and this is Reclaiming Healthcare. This is what happens when you're like in graduate school, working full-time. It's been a problem. So I really am going to try to film videos over the weekend, record them, edit them, do the whole shtick, and have them up on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So Wednesdays are going to be like our health policy days where we talk about United States healthcare policies, what's going on, what problems there could potentially be, and then on Saturday we're going to talk about health insurance. So if there's any particular topics you guys want to hear about, please in the comments below let me know. I'll be happy to talk about literally anything at this point. We're at a blank slate. Today we're going to talk about how in the hell did we get here. If you haven't bothered to take a look around, the United States is very different with our health insurance. If you look at most developed Western European countries such as United Kingdom or Canada or France or Spain or Japan or anywhere, they have some sort of universal health coverage. And while there are certain nuances to that whole thing, and if you care about that, we can talk about that in another video. If you are a citizen of that country, you then get the health insurance of that country. So why is the United States so vastly different, and how in the world did we get here? So we gotta go back. We're gonna take it back to the 1900s. At that time, medicine was really simplistic, for lack of a better term. Hospitals, essentially poorhouses. People would go to a hospital to die. And a lot of people who would go into hospitals, they obviously had no insurance coverage, but doctors themselves weren't as professional as they are today. Standardization for doctors didn't really exist. Medical schools range from having a few weeks of class to having years of classes, and having that experience really differed. And things that we think about as modern medicine, such as like antibiotics, weren't a thing back then. Fast forward to the 1920s and things changed. At that point in time, the American Medical Association had already been established. So you had some sort of standardization there. Medical schools and the credentialing for physicians had really changed. So physicians had to go through specific qualifications in order to get their medical license. You also have stuff like research that was starting to come about, new ways to actually solve issues. So great, that is a great thing for citizens themselves. When they go to the doctor, they have more consistent care. They know that there are things like antibiotics to treat infections, things like that. But for the hospitals themselves, this is a little bit of a problem. There was no such thing back then as preventative care. It was all sick care. An administrator at the Baylor University Hospital in Dallas, Texas noticed something. People were spending more money on cosmetics than they were on healthcare. So what Baylor tried to do, essentially to get more people to come to the hospital, was offer some sort of healthcare coverage. At that time, it was completely non-for-profit, and that's really how Blue Cross was born. And if you don't know, Blue Cross Blue Shield is one of the largest health insurance companies in the United States today. It was care given to teachers themselves. So you were a teacher, you got this Blue Cross coverage in order to go to Baylor Hospital and have some of that preventative care. What also happened during this time, very shortly after Baylor University Hospital in Texas started Blue Cross, spreading to a lot of different states, but it still wasn't that popular as far as preventative care. So then what happens is World War II and the Great Depression. Obviously the Great Depression happened first. So in a war economy, there was a lot of things that were rationed off. A lot of people were at war. So how do you get employees to continue to work at your place of employment, or how do you entice new employees to come on board if there's only so many things you can offer because the government is saying you can't? So that's where health insurance came into play. Employers would offer health insurance to incentivize employees to actually work for them. So that's really the birth of like the employer-based health insurance program. And all that means is because I have a job, I get health insurance. At that time, there was no such thing as like our Medicares and Medicaids. That didn't come till way later on. At that time, really, if you were somebody who was working, you had health insurance, and that was great for you. Premiums were pretty low. Your out-of-pocket expenses for health insurance were really low at the time. You could go wherever you want. You could do whatever you want. You could go get a CAT scan one day and an MRI the next day, and the insurance was not going to change its mind about what you can and cannot do. It was really a time of freedom for people who had health insurance. What also was really big at that time were two laws that were passed to really make health insurance given to employees from their employer, a system that was going to stick around for a long time. In 1943, the IRS decided that employer-based health insurance was going to be tax-free. So it was advantageous for any employer to give their employee health insurance. It was tax-free, so they were just paying for that health insurance itself, and it was a way to offer benefits to an employee. Instead of going to company A, they can come to company B and get a lot better health insurance, which is great. The original health insurance, these health insurances where you can do whatever you want, were known as indemnity plans. There were no networks. You could literally go wherever you wanted in the United States, which great for the employees, really bad for the health insurance companies. It becomes really expensive for them. So in the 1970s, we have the emergence of HMOs, which are known as health maintenance organizations. So with HMOs, the whole deal is someone else is managing your care. Most commonly, it's the provider. So your primary care physician says, you can go to a cardiologist because your heart's on the fritz, but you can't say you can go to the cardiologist because your heart's on the fritz. As far as healthcare expenses, the goal is to make sure that that provider is monitoring your care, where you're going, where you're not going. And that's really when that whole insurance authorizations really come into play. The provider asking the insurance company, is it okay for that person to go to cardiologist or neurologist and endocrinologist. People, HMOs, if you've ever had one, I haven't, but if you've ever had one, people either love them or hate them. HMOs did kind of actually help to slow down the rate of healthcare growth, but people didn't like them. It meant that they always had to go to their PCP whenever something was happening. They just didn't have the freedom that they had beforehand. So in about the 1990s, you have an expansion of managed care. So you start having your PPOs, which is participating provider organization, your POSs, which is point of service plans, and your EPOs, which is your exclusive provider organization. So that's how we've gotten here. With the Affordable Care Act, it has changed things to an extent. People are more entitled to healthcare benefits than they were before, which is great. Why is it important to know about the history of health insurance? Well, one, it's always nice to know what happened. How did we get to this point? But also two, health insurance reform is huge in the United States right now, especially with the election coming up. You have proponents like Bernie Sanders who wants to go to a single payer system, Hillary Clinton who wants to continue the Affordable Care Act, and you have Trump who wants to essentially get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have all these different proponents. In order to understand the impact of all of it, you kind of have to understand where we came from and where we could potentially go. So the Affordable Care Act has expanded insurance to a lot of different people. So whether you love it or hate it, that is kind of the essence of the plan. So here's the problem. If we go to something like a completely single payer, while it would be beneficial because a lot of countries have done it and are really successful, it's essentially turning our economy upside down. There's a lot of insurance companies like United Healthcare and Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield who are major players. If there's a single payer, what happens to them? Or all those people who have those jobs, who work for those particular companies? And you also need to think the biggest issue in the United States right now is healthcare costs. We spend most on healthcare than anyone else in the entire world, but we're not getting the best outcomes. If you look at a lot of different parameters, we're not number one in any of them, which you would assume that if we spend that much, we should be number one overall. That is really the core thing that you need to be worried about when it comes to deciding what you want to do with health insurance and healthcare in the future. I hope this is helpful. Next video up on Saturday. The last video had 15 views and I got a whopping 2 subscribers. I would love it if we can get to like 4 subscribers and like 25 views for this video. Again, let me know in the comments below what you want to hear. As always, make it work and I'll see you guys later. Bye.